Welcome to the Financial Coaches Podcast, where we talk about how to build your practice from startup to scale up while being the kind of coach your clients crave. Finally, a podcast for financial coaches. Here are your hosts, Maria Casillas and Cody Sizemore.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Financial Coaches Podcast. I'm Maria Casillas, joined here by my incredible co-host, Cody Sizemore. We are excited to be here today, and we are going to be talking about one of the case studies that Cody has. I mean, I call it a case study. He calls it a client. It's how we do things over here. Before we jump into that, though, I just wanted to say thank you to each and every one of you who has tuned in today. We appreciate you. We see you, and we are excited to continue to bring content to you that will be useful and beneficial in your business. Cody, I know that I didn't ask for this today. This is something that you asked to bring to the table, and I absolutely love the idea of talking about this for so many reasons. And I don't want to ruin it for the audience. I want you to be able to give them the down low, whatever it is on what's going on with your client. But before we jump into that, I do want to say that the reason I really like this topic is because of all of the nuance that's in there. It's going to be something where there might be some, controversy maybe in the way that you handled something or what someone else is doing. And people are going to go, why did he do it that way? Or, oh yeah, Cody did a great job. And that's why I'm really excited about this, because it's just going to, I think, pinpoint the nuance of how coaching is and how individualized it needs to be for each of our clients. So without further ado, tell us a little bit about this client and the situation and what it was about it that made you want to come to bring it here.
Yeah. So what it was that I wanted to talk about and why I wanted to talk about it is that this is the first time this has happened to me.
Okay. And you've been coaching a lot of people for a long time, and this is the first time that this has taken place.
Yeah, it'll actually be 5 years that I've been coaching in 3 days. So
That's
I
incredible.
coach a lot of people.
That's incredible that we're coming up on your anniversary, though. That's cool.
Yeah. So essentially, I've been working with someone for about 9-10 months, something like that. And he came into the situation, into our coaching relationship with a challenging situation. One that I knew would improve, one that I knew that, I felt very confident that I could help him with, but challenging nonetheless. And the first 6 months or so went great. He was like super on it. He was making good progress. He was, seeing his mindsets change. I could really see him as a person start to change as well. Like he was just becoming more intentional, more focused, all these different types of things, right? But then the last 3 or 4 months, he's been slowly but surely regressing in certain ways. And in particular, there was a couple decisions that he made probably about 3 months ago that he made definitely in a more impulsive kind of decision. Now, it was things that were important to him, but it was very, very taxing on him financially. And he just decided to do it. He didn't really talk to me about it. He just did it, kind of thing. And because of that, it's gotten him into a really, really challenging situation now. Probably more challenging on a month-to-month basis than where he was when he initially started. Now, overall, his overall landscape of his finances are better, but as far as feeling and operationally wise, on a month-to-month basis, it's definitely more challenging than where
So it affected his cash flow mostly.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And before you move on to kind of how it's affected the landscape and his monthly cash flow, I want to do the math real quick. It sounds like you've been working with him for about almost a year based on how you, okay.
Yeah, I would say like a month or two short of a year.
Okay. Yeah. And then it was about 6 to 8 months into working with him that some of this stuff happened.
Yeah.
And I just gave a pretty wide range there. I said 6 to 8 months. Was it closer to 6 months? But now that you're at the 8-month range, he's starting to experience the effects of those decisions at 6 months?
I would say so.
Okay. Okay. So I'm just trying to kind of put this in the framework for myself of the whole stages of change thing, right? So he obviously went through many of those with you, and he was solidly in action, not really in maintenance because he didn't get there, but it sounds like he started to experience some sort of trigger and then ultimately relapsed a little bit, right?
Hmm.
So before you
Not a little bit. He did relapse.
a lot. Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. So you mentioned that he did this without talking to you. And I'm just kind of curious to know what were some of the things that were leading up to this impulsive decision making? Were you able to see that as a coach in the moment? And if not, that's okay. Are you able to now look back and see what was leading up to it? Is he able to look back and see?
Yeah, there's really only one indication that I saw that that was the start of regression in behavior and also mindsets, which then led to him making those larger decisions that put him in a bind. Um, i- when we first started working together, he was pretty reliant on like Cash App advances or Zip
Okay.
advances and stuff like that. And then, we got him off of that. And probably around like the 6 to 7 month marker, I saw these little things, it said like Zip, like $80 kind of thing. And I was like, that's interesting. I haven't seen that in months. And
Mm,
I asked him about it. I was like, what's going on with Zip? And he was like, oh yeah, like this happened and this happened. And I just needed, a little bit, but I'm getting that taken care of. And I was like, okay, well, we should really try and not utilize that because that's one of the things that caused you to get in this in the first place. But noted, let's move forward kind of thing.
mm-hmm,
And then it started happening a couple more times. And then, shortly after that, everything else happened. So that would probably be the only indication um, that things started to go down the wrong path there, as well as also he started dating someone new as
mm,
well. And not that she's like a bad person or a bad influence or anything like that. She's got her own things that she needs to work through as well. But I did see some focus start to shift
mm-hmm,
away, and
mm-hmm.
thus also some decisions that weren't aligned with his original goals as well.
Okay. All right. And I presume you've already kind of walked through some of that with him and helped
Hmm.
him to then realize that those were some of the things that were
Hmm.
okay. Very good. Thank you. I just wanted to kind of put all of that into my perspective before you moved on and shared with the audience what ultimately he's coming to you for.
Yes, yes. So I'll get straight to the point. Essentially, I met with him last month, and he was like, "Hey, dude, I've got this going on. I've got that going on." Before we started working together, he enrolled into one of those debt relief programs where they just stop paying on everything, they let everything go into collections, and then eventually you get sent to the courts, you get sued, and all that kinds of stuff. So that's been developing as well.
Did he do
Um,
that with your knowledge or
this
behind your
was
back
this
or
was
before
before we
you?
started working together.
Okay.
Hmm.
Thank you.
Yep. And that's starting to really catch up with him as well. Like it seems like every month his payment keeps getting higher and higher and higher
Mm-hmm.
for it. So, long story short, last month he was like, "I'm really considering filing for bankruptcy," and I was like, "Your debt level isn't enough to really justify this bankruptcy. And really, like, we saw that you can do this. Like, you did it once before, you can do it again. However, I will admit, and I will agree with you, that the cash flow situation now is way more challenging than when it
Mm-hmm.
was the first time. So I understand why you're feeling the way you're feeling, but I also need you to understand where I'm coming from. That this is not just a circumstantial thing, this is a series of decisions that you had made that led to this point, kind of thing. And we had kind of a heated discussion. I mean, we weren't yelling at each other or anything like that, but I definitely told him before I went in on explaining why I felt that the bankruptcy wasn't a good option for him, and why I felt that taking the other route of just bootstrapping it would be the right option. I basically told him, I was like, listen, I'm gonna be really real with you for a moment here, and I'm going to give you some tough love. And I just went in on him, and that was our meeting last month. And then he came to the meeting yesterday. So I met him yesterday, and, we discussed everything. And he said, after some time to think about things and to weigh my options, I do think that it's best for me to move forward with bankruptcy. And here's this, and here's this, and here's this, as far as the reasons are as to why, right? Which he had, quite frankly, he had actually some good points. He really did. And I could see his thought process. I can see the benefits of it. I just didn't like it, you know? And I didn't like it partially because I don't want him to have a bankruptcy on his record. But also I didn't like it because I was like, well, I'm coaching you. And now you're filing for bankruptcy. And that doesn't make me feel good either, right? So there's a
Makes for
mix
a
of
great
those emotions.
testimonial, huh, Cody?
What's that?
It'll make for a great testimonial.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. But you know what? I said my piece. I made it very clear as to my feelings on it. I made it very clear as to my thoughts on it, and, everything around that. And ultimately, it's his money, it's his life, and it's his decision. Like, he is the boss, like, I'm not controlling anything that he does or does not do, kind of thing. So with all of that coming to a head, I basically made the decision that I wasn't going to fight him anymore on it. And I just said, hey, if this is something that you feel is best for you, then go file for bankruptcy. And I will be there to support you, because I think that it's important not to, weigh down on our clients' past decisions or mistakes too much. I think that there's a healthy level for that. But I think it's more important, instead of coming down on our clients for what had happened, to instead really empower our clients for their futures. And that's the approach I took with it on this call that I had yesterday with him. And at the end of the call, he basically said, hey, dude, I just want to say something to you. I really, really enjoy our sessions. I get a lot out of it. And I always look forward to it, always. But to be completely transparent with you, this meeting in particular, especially with what was said and how things went in our previous meeting, I was not looking forward to the session. In fact, I almost canceled it. But I'm glad that I didn't, because I'm really happy with how this session went and the approach that you took with me. I feel very supported. I understand where you're coming from, and I understand that, it's up to me moving forward to take responsibility on certain things and make sure that this doesn't happen again, and, get back to those good practices, get back to those good mindsets. But I feel like a huge weight is being lifted, to where I actually feel like I have a good support system to help me through this next chapter of my financial life, so that I never have to come back to it again, kind of thing. And that piece right there is what made me actually want to talk about this today. Long story short.
That's great. So it was the fact that he felt heard and respected that made you want to be able to bring this, even though he did something ultimately that you wouldn't have advised him to do.
Correct. Yep. And even after, some of that the relapse that we kind of talked about, that happened, like, I would say 2-3 months ago. He definitely went into pre-contemplation as well, because he stopped doing his budget. He stopped tracking. He has like a little side business as well. He stopped tracking his finances for that as well. He knew that there was a problem, but he didn't want to deal with it. And that was pre-contemplation. And then, probably over the last couple of weeks, he's been more into contemplation right now. And now, with this meeting that we had yesterday, he's definitely in the preparation mode. Preparation for the bankruptcy, but also preparation for post bankruptcy. Like, okay, I recognize what happened and I need to make the adjustments moving forward as well. So that whole stages of change, he's going through it
Mm-hmm.
as we speak.
Yeah. Well, first, I just want to say I applaud you for not suggesting that he's in action.
Mm-hmm.
That is a common mistake I think a lot of coaches make, because he's taking action in a certain way, but he's not taking action specifically for the change that he's actually trying to make. And so
Mm-hmm.
therefore he is preparatory. I would say he's taking preparatory action is what he's doing. So
Mm-hmm.
yes, he is in preparation there. Um, a couple of things I'm curious about. When you had this discussion with him, especially the one where he's like, I know I have to make some changes, etc. He actually, I'm gonna hit pause on that for a second and go back to the other question I had, because I think it should come first. You mentioned that he had made some of those small zip transactions and that you
Mm-hmm.
kind of saw that. But before you said that there were some pretty big decisions that he made without really going into too much detail and messing with confidentiality here. Could you name or describe one or two of those bigger decisions that were impulsive and made such a huge impact on his monthly cash flow? There's a
Mm-hmm.
reason I'm asking. It's not just purely nosiness.
Yeah. So I will talk about one in
Perfect.
particular because
Okay.
this was the one that really put a stamp on things.
Okay.
Um, and it was very upsetting to me, but also very understanding because I know exactly who he is. So let me first say this. I'll preface this. The reason that he's working on his finances is not to build wealth. It's not to, be rich or anything like that. He has a dream of really investing himself into music.
Okay.
And I identify with that because that's where I come from. I
Okay.
played in bands, I toured across the country, I booked concerts for a living. So, while that is something that's very challenging for people to have a successful life with, I'm not going to suppress someone's passion or someone's dream if that's their ultimate goal.
Hmm.
So the whole goal with this finances is let's get ourselves out of debt, let's get some money in the bank so that we have a foundation to build off of so that we can pursue music the way that we really want to, kind of thing.
Hmm.
So that's important to know because the decision that he made that was impulsive was he uh every year before we started working together, he would go to this really big, like 3 or 4 day festival. And he'd always go all out. You get like the all access, the VIP, the this, the that kind of thing. Um, and we had talked about it for this year and basically said like, hey, should we do this or not? If we do this, what should this look like? Should it be more scaled back this year? Blah, blah, blah. So we had those discussions, but he decided to just go all out again.
Hmm.
He bought the whole thing and he fronted for two of his friends as
Hmm.
well, which his friends have not paid him back yet. Well, one of them has, but the other one hasn't. And he spent thousands of dollars on this and he put it on a payment plan to which the payment came out to be about $750 a month.
Oh, how many thousands of dollars then?
It was, I think it was close to 10.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Okay.
dropping, 10 grand, $600 or $700 a month on concert tickets,
Mhm.
essentially.
Now that should be done within about a year, right? That that payment? Mhm.
Hmm.
Okay. Um, oh, okay. So what's interesting to me about that is that you actually had the conversation ahead of time and almost gave permission for him to go, maybe even scaled back a little bit. In that discussion, did he decide, "No, I'm not gonna go"?
No, he knew he was going.
Okay.
Hmm.
So it wasn't worked into the plan, or was it, but just at a really low level? And then I'm trying to figure out the impulsivity here because it
Yeah,
doesn't sound as impulsive as you describe it,
yeah.
based on this information.
So we had that discussion several months ago.
Okay.
We came to the conclusion that, like, he wants to go, which again, it's fine. Like, if one time a year you do something nice for yourself, it's fine. You know, But we did discuss like, going on a scaled back level. And I said like, hey, when you get ready to start making that decision, let's talk about this again, because it's several months down the road, so we can develop a plan and kind of go from there. And it just never was brought back up.
Mm,
And he just went out and did the whole thing. So,
okay.
yeah.
So as you're discussing some of this moving forward with him, which I mean, here's the thing, I just want to make sure that, and I know you're doing this already, but for our listeners, when we're trying to help somebody avoid or make the next lapse a little bit smaller or a little bit shorter or a little bit less likely, all we're trying to do is help clients start to recognize their patterns. And it's not just patterns in behavior, it's patterns in thinking as well. And in this case, I'm going to use the word sneaky. I don't know if it's the right word, but I'm using it anyway. He was almost being sneaky about this because you gave him the opportunity to talk about it. He either shoved it under the rug and said, no, I'm not going to do it. And so if that was the case, he just lied, like, no, I'm not going to go. Or he just sort of avoided it, knowing that intentionally he planned to do that in the first place. So that's just one of those pieces of information to help him recognize, because if he starts to become that way in other areas of his life, it is a sign of this could be sending you into another relapse.
Yeah. I can understand that perspective. Knowing him, though, I don't think that he did this in a sneaky way or a malicious way. I
Okay.
think that he has ADHD as
Mm-hmm.
well.
Mm-hmm.
I think that he was just in the moment
Mm-hmm.
and just did it.
Okay, so that impulsivity, that's where that comes
Yeah.
from. You're
Yeah.
recognizing that as being the impulsivity.
Yeah.
Okay, so in that case then it's that desire to be impulsive that would
Mhm.
throw him off of the rails, and that's where he needs to start recognizing. Okay, so usually, especially with people who have ADHD, that impulsivity shows up in lots of different areas, right?
Mhm.
Not just financial. And so it will be good for him to be able to recognize that impulsivity in those other areas before it hits the financial sector of his
Mhm.
life. So okay. So I think also the piece here is like that whole idea of you're not his master. You don't get to
Mhm.
decide everything that he does. And that you empowered him with that decision making. I really appreciate that he recognized that and was grateful for it. I mean, he
Mhm.
stated to you, look, I was really scared to come here and do this. Um, just playing devil's advocate. And this is actually not what I think. I truly am playing devil's advocate. For the person out there who says you were way too easy on him, what do you say?
I would say that you weren't on the calls
Mm,
because I was not easy on him. I definitely gave him some tough love. I gave him a lot of truth.
mm-hmm,
And that's why I was okay with releasing it.
mm-hmm,
You know, if I released it and I felt like I didn't say what I needed to say, yeah, I could totally understand why someone was like, "Well, you're being a pushover. You're not a good coach because you're not holding them accountable or anything like that." No,
mm-hmm,
no, 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 no. I held him accountable.
mm-hmm,
I called him out. I said what I needed to say, and he heard me, and I made sure he heard me as well. And after all of that, we still got to this place, and I was like, I can make two decisions here. I can either say, "Alrighty, buddy, go do your bankruptcy, and best of luck to you, because I'm done." Or I could say, "Alrighty, dude, go do your bankruptcy, and let's make sure that this never happens again." And I chose the
mm-hmm,
latter.
mm-hmm. And what about
It's
the
as simple as
person?
that.
Yeah, I love it. And what about the person who says, well, okay, so you did a good job and you gave him the tough love, and he obviously did it anyway. So clearly he's not even a good client. He's not willing to do the things that you put out there for him. He's not motivated. What do you say to that?
Has anyone ever been married before?
Are you asking me for real?
It's kind of like a rhetorical question,
Okay.
but my point is like you when you're with a client, it's not just a client, like it's a relationship. It's a working relationship. And if you had a really good relationship with someone for 85% of the time that you were in a relationship with them, and then they make, a couple mistakes that have some pretty heavy consequences. I mean, what are you going to do? Are you going to divorce them? Or are you going to meet them where they're at and say, hey, I know that you're struggling with this. What can I do to support you? What can we do to make sure that this doesn't happen again moving forward? Because I care about our relationship. I care about you as a person. That it's the same exact thing, like, now if he goes out and he files another bankruptcy, then maybe at that point, right? But like, people make mistakes, and this is someone who had struggled with their finances their entire lives. Up until we started working together, he really didn't have any sort of support. He didn't have any sort of knowledge. He didn't have any sort of education on anything. This is all still new for him. So who am I to expect perfection? Who am I to expect that someone's going to do everything right all the time, every single month, over and over and over and over and over, and never fault? Like, that doesn't make sense to me, So that's what I would say is, like, this is not a bad client. He had a few bad decisions that led up to this point. He's still a really good client. Even the conversation we had yesterday, like, he took ownership of it. He didn't say, oh, it's because of this reason, or it's because of that reason, or this person did this to me, or whatever. No, he took ownership of it. And he's taking ownership of things moving forward as well. So that's what I would say is, like, I'm not going to give up on someone just because they didn't do what I said.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and made a couple of bad choices. I agree with you, and I'm glad I asked the question because it brought in that passion. That was a very passionate
It
response that you
did.
had, and I love that. I also appreciate that you brought in him owning it, because that's something, and maybe we can talk about this another time. But that is something that, as you were talking, I recognize this as a pattern for you and for him, that you owned the things that you did with him, and you did not back down, and you did not, when I pushed a little bit, just playing devil's advocate, you're like, yeah, this is what I did, and I'm proud of what I did, and I stand behind that, and I would do it the same way again.
Mm-hmm.
And he is taking ownership. Now he's taking ownership, at least verbally, for the things that he had done in the past. And now it's going to be your job to help him continue to take ownership for those decisions that he makes going forward. I think that what might make that a little bit easier is having him see that pattern of decision made and not feeling the consequence of that until weeks to months later.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that seems to be what's happened for him, right? He makes this decision. It's really fun. It's like having that high, and then you have the withdrawal weeks to months later. And if he continues to do that, that's going to be a pattern of not changing, right? That behavior is like, okay, well, now it looks like you're making this good decision, but let's just see what it looks like 2 months from now. But allowing him to see that pattern, and maybe even just pointing it out to him, drawing it out of him even, will allow him to go, if I make this decision right now, what's it going to look like 2 months from now? And so, like I said, we could talk about that in a little bit more detail later, but just that whole idea of him owning that, I think, is really important.
Yeah, it is. And it's tough to talk about someone and, like, what you see in them and the type of person they are without actually talking to them.
Yeah.
It's tough to do that. But I will say in full confidence, I do not see this happening again for him. I don't. Just because of the way he's been talking about things, because of the way that, the conversations have gone over the last couple of months, or the last couple of meetings that we've had. It's very clear to me that he understands the ramifications of his actions, and he understands what's going to happen moving forward, with the bankruptcy and post bankruptcy as well. And to me, that's what's actually important. That's what's important to me. Like, if someone's playing football, right? Like, and so perfect example, I'm a big Detroit Lions fan, right? They had a rookie last year. His name was Terrion Arnold. drafted in the first round, supposed to be a really good player. But cornerback is one of the hardest positions to learn and to excel at, especially for a rookie. Like, it usually takes him like 2 or 3 years to really fall into place to become like a really good player. Whereas with other positions, sometimes they just come right out of the gate and they're superstars kind of stuff. But at the beginning of last year, he was very handsy and he got a lot of pass interference calls, which were very costly to the team. But by the end of the year, he was actually quite good. And it's like, well, if the coaches saw the pass interference penalties in the first 4 to 5 games and they said, hey, you're costing the team too much, we're going to bench you, then he wouldn't have the opportunity to develop, to learn, to become more skillful, and to become that really good player that he was towards the end of the year. And I think that he's going to be really, really good going into this season as well. So he wouldn't have had the opportunity to grow if he didn't make those mistakes and he didn't have a supporting coaching staff behind him to help him develop. And it's the same exact thing with this. Like, he's making some pass interference penalties with his finances these past few months. I'm going to be there to coach him up. Period.
Yeah,
So.
I love it. Love it. And I think the other thing that before we close up is that it's just a reminder that we do the same thing. I mean, like, we have our own coaches because we have our own stuff, and we make our own mistakes. We make our own pass interferences. Just so you know, that will be the only reference I ever make to sports.
I know.
because you just said the term. Otherwise, I wouldn't even remember. Ask me when we stop recording today, and I'll be like, I don't remember what that play is called. Anyway, we do that ourselves. And so I think it's a humbling experience to walk with somebody along this path, because oftentimes it's like I was one bad decision away from entering that same path. And if we can remember that and be not just humbled by it, but also gracious with our clients, I think that that's going to go a lot further than just harping on the bad decisions that they've made in the past.
I agree. Well, thanks for letting me get it all out today. It's been on my mind. So, yeah. Alrighty, guys. Well, thank you for listening to this episode of the Financial Coaches Podcast. We'll be back next week with a new episode. And if you haven't yet, go ahead and join our free Facebook group, which is called the Financial Coaches Community by New Money Habits. It's a great and growing community there, and you can drop questions for us to talk about on the show there and connect with us as well. So until next week, we'll catch you guys soon.
Thank you for listening to the Financial Coaches Podcast, brought to you by New Money Habits and Sizemore Financial Coaching. Submit your questions to our hosts by emailing podcast@newmoneyhabits.com. Be sure to subscribe to be notified of future episodes and join our growing group of like-minded coaches on Facebook. And until next time, happy coaching.